Now, we all fail in life at some point, regardless of how good you are. And being upset by failure is a good thing. It motivates you to become a better version of yourself. And I do empathize for people that are trying to work their way back up. But excuse me if I don't shed a tear for former Auburn head coach Bryan Harsin after he had one of the worst tenures a head coach has ever had at a place that has shown that you can be a big-time winner like Auburn. Now, excuse me if I don't also cry into the night for someone who got a buyout of almost $8 million after doing absolutely nothing he said that he would when he got named the head coach at Auburn. And I bring this up because in a recent article by Chris Lowe of ESPN, he painted Bryan Harsin as a victim and said now he is thriving. And Harsin threw some subtle jabs at Auburn, saying he saw the worst in people. And while there's some things that Auburn could have done better, nobody's going to argue against that. He has nobody to blame but himself. Now, I always give new coaches the benefit of the doubt when taking over a job. I did the same with Bryan Harsin. I've been in the business. I know how the sausage is made. And it's one thing to fail after giving your best effort and doing everything you can to succeed. But that's not what Bryan Harsin did. He thought he could just coast by, just by being the head coach that didn't recruit and didn't understand the grind it takes to be successful in that position in the SEC. The lack of his recruiting effort and overall arrogance is what doomed him. All he wanted to do was lift weights and talk about accountability while he exhibited none of the latter. Even the greatest ever, like Nick Saban, understands to this day the effort necessary for a head coach in recruiting. Now, Harsin thought Auburn was just lucky to have him, when in fact, he was lucky to get the job. Now, typically, guys who get their first really big shot as a head coach in a big-time conference are chomping at the bit to go out and put together the best roster possible. But not Bryan Harsin. To put it plainly, he was a house cat. He wanted his milk brought to him instead of going out in the wild and earning it. Now, there were salacious rumors that he had to endure and pressure from boosters when he wasn't performing. But guess what? That's life in the SEC and high-level college football in general. You aren't the first to have to go through it, and you definitely won't be the last. Now, I'm not excusing some of the bad behavior because it did happen, but spare me the whining and crying, Bryan. Winning cures all of that. Now, he may have seen the worst in some people during his tenure, but Auburn saw some of the worst coaching that they've ever seen during his tenure as well. Let's look at the numbers. He finished his days at Auburn 9-12 overall. That's the worst record for a non-interim head coach at Auburn since 1948. He finished 2021 on a 5-game losing streak and started 2022 3-5. That 3-10 stretch is the worst 13-game stretch at Auburn since 1928. And those guys didn't get $8 million just to get the hell out. So if we're going to talk about the worst, Bryan Harsin takes the cake. Now, everything aside, it seems that he is happy. He's got his family around him right now, and I'm glad for him. He's super rich. You should be. But to paint him as a victim is just flat out unrealistic. But hey, at least this time when he's lifting weights and talking about accountability, he won't be sinking a major program while doing it. I'm going to go ahead and bring in my co-host, former Michigan quarterback David Cohn, my brother, former Western State Colorado wide receiver.
Get it right.
Crane, I'm sorry. You come in here, you get my wife's name right.
Disrespectful.
I apologize.
Huddle up.
Huddle up. What did you say the name?
Huddle up. We suck.
That's one of the best lines you ever had.
Oh,
and David, look, there's been so many examples of head coaches having to deal with craziness and crazy fan bases and boosters and all of that. Yeah. Why? And again, I don't want to excuse bad behavior, but this man sat up there time and time again and talked about accountability and not making excuses and not painting yourself like a victim. And then him and his buddy, Chris Lowe, get together and put out this Nicholas Sparks piece about how hard it was for him. You know who I feel bad for? The people that get screwed over? Coal miners and single mothers and people that don't get paid $8 million to go out and hang out in Idaho. So, again, there's good and bad on both sides. But when you look at the numbers, Bryan Harsin just couldn't get it
Yeah,
done.
I was surprised by those numbers that you were spouting off there. I didn't see the particular article that you're talking about, and we spent some time around Bryan Harsin at the last couple SEC media days. I really bought into what he was selling. I thought he was going to have success at Auburn. Talking about it takes more than just talking about accountability and things like that. But like we talked about Bryan Harsin, you can't not be elite at everything. Right? Like you have to succeed, especially in one area. If you're going to be sandwiched between Athens and what Kirby Smart's doing and Tuscaloosa with Nick Saban, you either need to be an elite recruiter or an elite developer or an elite play caller. Like something you have to be really great at. And it just wasn't working at Auburn for him.
Yeah, and Blaine, if you don't believe me when talking about effort in recruiting from the head coach, and I'm not talking about Auburn's staff. I'm not talking about Cadillac Williams. I'm not talking about Zach Etheridge. Yeah. These guys were out there grinding every single day. Trevon Reed, those guys.
They're still there.
I'm not. There's a reason.
Why.
There's a reason. I'm not talking about them. But when you have high school coaches coming out and disparaging the head coach at Auburn because his ass won't go out there and give effort in recruiting, you don't deserve to win. You don't deserve to be able to walk around and have that AU pin on your chest as the head coach. You can't expect it to be handed to you, and that's what I think he expected.
Yeah, he was a fake. That's what he was. He's a fraud. He's a phony. I mean, he knew how to put on a face. He was at a place in Boise State where they basically just delivered you players.
Yeah.
They delivered you players here. Your guys are going to play on Saturday, and you're going to be on the upper echelon in your conference of better athletes. Then you come down to Auburn, right, where you have to hunt. Yeah. You have to go kill what you need to eat at night. You have to go get these guys. And it's not like Auburn's some program that's just coming out of nowhere that you're going to have to bring to the top. Auburn can get guys, all right? We've seen it.
They're doing it right now.
Hugh Freeze right now is balling. He hadn't even coached a snap, but you're seeing the effort and not being afraid to go get the bag. And Hugh's always been able to go get the bag. And Bryan Harsin just tricked everybody. That's what he did. Yeah. What did he do well? What did he do well? Nothing. Bo Nix, offense terrible. Never got better up front. Defense was good, but not because of him. Bo Nix, your quarterback, his dad played at Auburn, right? Starting quarterback at Oregon right now. Because of who? Bryan Harsin, right? At the end of the day, he tricked everybody. I'm glad he's gone. Go sit in Idaho and cry about it with all your millions of dollars. I don't care. Auburn is better for Bryan Harsin being gone. I don't care about the boosters or any other situation he was dealing with. He didn't recruit. He wasn't good at calling plays, and the team's culture was falling apart.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about it, because I got on here and said when he took the job, it is a risk. It is a risk when you jump into the deepest water. And I sat here, and again, like I said, I'll give guys the benefit of the doubt. I know how hard it is. I know how big of a risk that is. I know it's a lot of money, but it is a big risk. And you see what happens. When you fail, you can fall off the face of the earth pretty quickly. And my biggest thing was, what? I think Bryan Harsin wanted to know at the end of the day, am I good enough? And typically those guys go and they are willing to do whatever it takes within the parameters of what's legal and even bend the rules a little bit to really find out. That was the most disappointing part for me. And if you've ever been to Auburn, regardless of fan affiliation, there's great people in Auburn. There's bad people everywhere. Yeah. There's bad parts of every single fan base. And some of the stuff was ridiculous. The stuff with the intern and all that, he didn't deserve that. But guess what? When that doesn't happen? When you win. And that's just the nature of the beast. And it'll always be that way. Hey there, YouTube. Thank you guys for stopping by. If you don't know, we do a live sports show every weekday from 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern. That's 6:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. Central. We do live call-ins on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we have a live chat that we call the Booster Club that we interact with the whole time. We're covering sports the way you're used to, the way that you saw it growing up, with common sense, great breakdowns, and a fun time. Make sure you subscribe.